So, hello everyone to the Chinalogue China podcast. This is a podcast which was initially introduced in German language. However, today we have a special edition in English. Overall, to me, I'm the host of this podcast. My name is Sabrina Weithmann, and I'm happy that you're all watching this video or listening to the podcast. So what about today's topic? Overall, as I said, usually this podcast is in German. However, as the topic of today's podcast is what we can learn from Chinese female leaders, we had a lot of people asking whether we could do this podcast in English as well. So we decided to, do that. And so it's the first special edition which we do in English, and I hope you like it. Okay, so first of all, I'd like to introduce today's interview partner, Bettina Al-Sadik Lowinski. Hi, Bettina.
Hello, nice to meet you, and I'm very happy to be here. It's my first video podcast.
It's also my first video podcast, so let's see how it goes. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so you studied in France, which is quite unusual because you, did your PhD about China and female leaders in China, but you did that PhD in France. And as you spoke in German last time, I guess you're German as well. So this seems like a very interesting setting here. Can you tell us more about that?
Right, I'm German and mainly living in Cologne and right now in France because I'm married to a Frenchman. And I have worked many years in management myself and then started executive coaching in Japan and then later in China. So I met so many fantastic, successful ladies over there. And then my old idea of doing a PhD came up again. And my doctor father, Professor Gregory Weithmann from the University of Burgundy, was interested right away. He's the Asia specialist of this university. And so, I'm a German and I did my PhD with the China topic with a French university. So with our family background, that's not so unusual.
Yeah, okay, now it starts to make sense. It's very interesting, yeah. So you didn't only write a book about China, but there's also a bit more to this whole topic, which we'll dive into. First of all, I got really interesting when I saw the title of your book because I once went to a lecture, which was a German author, and he wrote a book about successful Chinese companies, but he mainly interviewed male leaders of those companies. And I think there was one woman as well. And having in my mind that, in China, the proportion of female leaders is much higher than it is here. I was asking him this question, why do you think, it's such a different situation in China? And I was a little bit shocked because his answer was mainly that, there was the one-child policy, and of course, if you have only one child, you would also support your daughter. And so I couldn't believe that this is the only answer to this. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's from figures and from research literature, we know that roughly about 38% of all senior management levels in China are held by women. And whereas, for example, Germany in the same research was only 16%. So it's a huge gap for our country here. And China is far ahead amongst the leading countries. And of course, there's a number of reasons why that is like it. And in my research, where 35 women participated, it's a qualitative research, we learned that, of course, it's external factors, but then that's also about the women themselves. And I think it's a mix of these both things where the answer lies for that question.
Okay, sounds interesting. I think there are also many factors regarding history that actually push the role of women in China. In your book, many women mentioned also the topic of the Cultural Revolution. What do you think about that?
Yes, the women in my research mentioned several times the equality laws in China and how China changed. And very often they mentioned Mao with that famous saying that women hold half the sky. And to their experience in their environment, in management, this is really true. They believe that there was a real shift in China, starting almost 2 generations ago, towards equality for women. And they, in their experience, well, they said, well, we have that, we are equal.
Okay. I mean, there have been many aspects in history. I mean, the reform opening, for instance, was also one of those events that women really believe kind of pushed their career, because there were suddenly far more options than there were before for them. I mean, you describe many of the women in your book. Can you maybe just give us example of 2 of them and describe their characters and how those historical events affected their career?
Yes, of course, the women in the research, and the name of that research is Shanghai Career Lab. They have started their careers around the opening. So some a little bit before that, and some right in the main phase, I would say, and some the younger ones after that. But there are 2 main kinds in the group that I like to mention here. I analyzed 5 career types in total. But 2 very typical ones are the ones that I called flexible hoppers, and they are building their careers strategically by changing companies. So they have changed company in average 5 to 6 times. And with each change of company, they went 1 level higher. So that is one group, and they mainly did their careers in China. Then another very typical group are what I call the unbounded global group. So they have also these company changes, but then they have, of course, a global component. They have worked 1 time or 2 times overseas. They have studied overseas. So these are 2 very typical groups in my research.
Okay. And then, of course, traveling was only possible due to the reform opening in terms of those in multinational careers.
Yes.
Okay. Another aspect which I found really interesting was also the term of communism mentioned by some of the women in your book. And I mean, there are also what we know from Germany as well, like Eastern Germany, where, well, you had communism and it all developed a little bit differently. But in terms of how women could actually develop their careers, it was also very differently, or it happened very differently due to the different setting of equality. Like you have kindergartens, and it was very normal to put your child into in childcare just 3 months after birth, which is very different in the west of Germany. And in China, it's pretty much the same. It's not bad to put your child in childcare very soon. So does this have something to do with the communist system as well, that they...
Well, yes, I think so. Well, I did not focus on politics so much in my research, but for sure, one of the factors for career building for every woman worldwide is, of course, the political support and the society support. So from what I heard from these women in the Shanghai Career Lab, they felt that in their environment, women have a lot of support. And with the laws, of course, but laws are one thing. We have laws in Germany and we have laws in China for equality. Then it comes up to how the society, how everybody is living up to these values which are behind these laws. And I felt that in China, it's the norm to work full-time, first of all. So the women, they explained to me that for 2 generations, their mothers and grandmothers were already working full-time. So their role models are full-time working. And then I also found a research from China Daily, where I think thousands of people participated, and they asked so what is the ideal women in China? And the answer was it's the high-flying professional who's also mother. So the society is seeing women in their careers very, very positive. And when they are mothers, it's even more positive. And then they have a lot of support from everybody. This is what the women explained to me.
Okay. I think you also mentioned that being a mother is a quality that actually pushes your career, because being a mother also means you're responsible and serious and things like that.
Well, here I can answer that question with two things. Of course, these women also said, when I asked them, so what means motherhood for your career? First of all, they said, the majority said, not so much. Yeah, it was not an important factor. And a smaller group said, well, it meant a delay. So I had several stops, and then I went again and I rose to the next level. In general, the image in the society of having a child and being a working mother is very, very positive. So the women said to me, well, in general, we try to support mothers. On the other hand, pregnancy itself can be a challenge. Yeah, because if you are pregnant right at the moment when a promotion is coming, reactions cannot be really foreseen. Yeah, so a lot of women strategically, they changed their job with pregnancy. So they knew already, well, I will have a baby. They stopped the company and they had a little break, and then they went to the higher level in the next company.
Oh, okay. So a baby as a reason to change your career track. That's interesting as well.
And and interestingly, to rise up, no?
Yeah.
Not to go to a lower level or the same, but to find a job that is one level higher. That for me was really, I've never heard that before.
Yeah. I mean, here, I guess it's rather that you go one level, or like you go below, right? So you would have a baby and then you come back, but then you have a level lower than you had before. Okay. I mean, what we have in Germany is the concept of the Rabenmutter. I think we should mention this because it's very typical for Germany. And I discussed this, like, since our last podcast, I discussed this with many people. And I didn't find anyone else who had this concept of the Rabenmutter. It seems very typical German. And I also spoke to someone from Eastern Germany, and they also said, like, they don't know that there. It's very Western German to have this concept. It's actually bad to put your child in, well, childcare. And so has anything like this come across to you in China, or just simply not at all?
Well, not at all. Like you already said, this concept and also the name Raven Mother, perhaps we should explain, like a raven, they will push out their babies very soon from the net, from their home, and then the baby must take care for themselves. So this image in Germany is quite strong, and I think we are raised with it inside of us. So a good mother means you have to be present. In China, it's very different. Taking care of the child is very often the job of a whole family system. And very often it's a job of grandparents. So they retire earlier, and then they will go into their second job. And the second job is household and taking care of the one or two childs. I had both in my research. So it's a very different system, but where the family is supporting the whole thing. So the mother can be absent, she can go on business travel, she could even live for a while in another country. I had all kinds of constellations where we in Germany, we would immediately judge that and say, oh, wow, that's too bad. No? I mean, that's individual how you judge it. No? I wouldn't say you have to see it in this or this way. But in China, it's possible.
Yeah, okay. You also mentioned in your book that it's different in the North, though. Does this have something to do with this concept, or is that just that, I don't know, the career development in Northern China is different?
Yeah, well, I asked the women to rate how they feel equality in China on a scale from 0, where it means no equality, to 10, total equality. And they gave China, the majority gave China 7 to 8 points. Interestingly, the ones who know Germany gave Germany 3 to 4 in the same, on the same scale.
Yeah.
But then I asked, so why 7 and 8 is already high? Why not 10? And then very often they said, well, you know, China is such a huge, big country, and we have a lot of undeveloped and rural areas. And especially in the northern regions, it's still very traditional. So there probably men would have more chances. But then on the other hand, I had several women that have been raised in the north and started their careers in the north, and they are also very successful. But they all said, well, it's not yet 10, it's probably 8. And 8, I think, is high.
Yeah, yeah. But it's, I think, something that people often forget, that China is such a huge country. So,
Yes.
of course, your research focus was on the Shanghai Career Lab. So, of course, there are many different cities. It's a little bit like comparing France to Germany sometimes, right?
Yeah.
It can be very different, and yeah.
Yeah, but I have to say it's called Shanghai Career Lab, but the women included came from all parts in China.
Okay.
Their career development then, of course, after the initial steps were taking place in the major business cities, but also Beijing, Guangzhou. So I have included a variety of women. At the moment of the interviews, they were in Shanghai. That's why we gave it that name.
Okay, understood. So let's talk about Confucianism. How does this affect career development? Because it's, I mean, very imprint in the culture and how people develop or push careers.
Yeah. That was, it's a complex question. Probably it can't be answered in one sentence, and you have to go really deep here. But what the women, I asked them, so how, the very basic question, how did Confucianism, oh wow, as a German, that's difficult, has an effect on your career? And spontaneously, they looked at me and they said, wow, probably nothing, no effect.
Yeah.
And then while they reflected, they said, well, you know, I think we know what you mean. It's not negative. Because in the literature, very often you have that connection from being in that tradition in China, Confucian tradition, means suppressing of women. Because there is something in the Confucianism saying that the man is higher than the women. But they said this is from old times, and the interpretation today needs to be seen differently. And for us, it only means that our management style is a very positive influence, because we take care of our teams, we watch out for caring for the other person, we do something for society, and so on. So they see a lot of positive aspects to their management style, but no one said that there is a negative influence.
Okay. You also mentioned that women don't just follow this Confucius style somehow in their management, but they also combine it with the Western style. But I was wondering how this is actually practiced. Like, how do you combine it, and what influence does it have on how they run a business?
Yes, the main strengths of these women that the analysis showed was that they really have a very strong intercultural competence. I would even say a global mindset. Yeah. So what does it mean? In their work concept, in their management, they are able to move between cultures. So when they act in a more Western context, they adapt fully. And they adapt, and that's important, happily. Yeah, it's not a forced adaptation. It's something that comes very natural. And then when they are in a pure Chinese context, they will act to their values. And so the management style is shifting with what is needed in a multicultural environment. And that was very impressive for me. And some of them have worked with several cultures, head office cultures like Spanish, American, German, and so on. And they could talk for hours about the differences and what they loved about it. So they are really curious, positive about cultures, and they have an ability to adapt and then to work with it.
Okay, would you say that's different about German women?
Well, I can't answer that question because I'm running a new research now where I will also include German women. I can't answer that, but for me it was quite something very particular to these women. And when you know the background of China, and in major cities, a lot of foreigners in the history have already been there. I think it's a strength, at least of these women who made it to top levels. And they said, we are stronger with this than men.
Okay. Yeah.
Than probably Chinese men. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I'm curious about your next research then. Let us know about that.
Yeah. Let's see.
Something that I also came across in your book is that some women, well, like first they kind of mentioned that, well, Confucius is not so, or doesn't have that much influence. And then they said, well, it actually does, but somehow it's positive. But then on the other hand, they also mentioned financials as a very important thing in their career. So high salary is very important and also brings them something back. But the way they placed their arguments was also much in the direction that, well, they need to earn much to kind of give something back to their parents, which then I would say is, very Confucius.
Yeah, well, I asked them about their definition of their motivation for a career, and also what success means to them. And then the answer was, of course, in the beginning, financials. And I mean, ask an executive in the Western world, financials always play a role, if we are honest. No? Yeah, we have to earn our money, and if we earn more, it's better. But then for them, the main motivation in their career stage where they are right now is probably more fulfillment. So they said, well, I want to do something meaningful. I want to do something for my team, and I want to also give back to the society. This is what they said very often. Now, the relationship with the parents, I think if you know the Chinese family system, it's very strong. And people are really probably stronger connected than we are in Germany. They stay together, and the parents of these women very often had not so much money. And even though they came from various backgrounds, they came from academic backgrounds, but also from farmers. So they wanted, of course, to give back, and some of them really take care financially for their parents. And then the parents in return look after the kids. So it's a system with their own values and rules, and it's very strong. And so these generations are still very connected in China.
Yeah, okay. Makes sense in terms of the cultural aspects as well, and the value of the family in China, which is another topic that we could discuss for hours, I guess.
Yeah.
Another interesting part was also, I'm just citing now some of the women in your book. I think there was one mentioning, well, it's important for them to keep life simple so they can focus on the career. Another said, well, I don't have hobbies, I don't need them. Those were expressions that I thought, like in Germany, even if you would mention them, people would look at you like you're totally crazy. And it's like, it's rather something bad to not have hobbies and not focus on your social life. And in China, it seems rather normal.
Well, I remember that one lady saying that, and probably there is a tendency of working very hard. They all said in the beginning of their careers, they were working extremely hard, long hours, a lot of business travel, and still at the top where they are right now, they do that. My interpretation was, looking at them, that this is not a burden to them, but they enjoy it. So when they said, I keep my other life simple, probably they know, because they have such a high intercultural competences that we were waiting for some hobbies or whatever. Some said, well, now I don't do that so much. No? My life is really focused on work. My feeling was that they enjoy that. Of course, they have, to be honest, of course, they have challenges, no? For sure. Yeah. But not having these hobbies, no, I didn't have the feeling that this is a topic.
Okay. Well, that's an answer as well. I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
I always had the feeling, like, when I was in China and you're trying to find some activities that you can do with Chinese. The first of all, it's always about food. You meet them for dinner or lunch or whatever.
Yeah.
And then when you would say, like, in Germany, you get closer to each other and you go and see movies or you go play tennis or whatever, it sometimes gets really difficult. When I tried to make friends in China, like the first time, which was mainly during my studies, I always had the feeling that even during the studies, they were so focused on sitting in the library that they just didn't have time to enjoy life.
Well, my environment, I coached a lot there, and I trained new coaches. So I was surrounded by people who enjoy learning, and this connected us deeply. So I personally, I don't think that not going to tennis or to restaurants means that you have less connection. But for sure, the young Chinese, this is what you mentioned, they work very hard, they study a lot, and probably too much. No? But my connection to these women in some extent went deeper than sometimes in Germany. We shared this learning orientation, and we stay connected in learning groups, and then from there it develops. No? And of course it cannot develop with everyone, but with some, yes, I would say yes. They became friends.
Okay. I mean, I have Chinese friends now as well, and as you said, it's developing somehow, and you find common ground for entertaining stuff as well. But I always had the impression that the term hobby is also very differently defined than what we have here. Yeah.
So I have to say the what I analyzed here is also what research calls the career orientation of these women, and there you find a common result. They have a very strong career orientation. So they knew from early on that they wanted to go higher, that they want to be the best in the job. Yeah, they say it literally like that. But it's one factor that we need in the corporate system to be outstanding, that men also need. So you have to decide at a certain point. When I coach younger women, I say, well, so how much of career do you want? And what we can see from this group, it's very clear. They were clear on it. They wanted it.
We're already going in the direction of my next question, which is pretty good, because we talked a lot about the environment and the different setting of culture and so on. But what actually makes the personality of those women that you asked for your interviews?
Yeah, that was one of the main parts also in my book, is the question: how are the women in the Shanghai Women's Career Lab? And well, I mentioned certain points already, but what I can say is beside the strong career orientation and this high global intercultural competence, these women are extremely flexible and adaptable. And when you come from career research, these 2 points are very important in order to rise up into management. So what does it mean? Flexible with work context, flexible with locations, flexible with dealing with different people, and then adaptable. Adaptable sounds so soft, no, for us, but in a corporate system, you need to adapt quite a lot. And so they have these 2 points strongly. Then they are very mobile. within China. And please, for everybody who has never been in China, China is so huge. So it would mean like you travel in the morning from Berlin to Moscow. That's a normal business travel for them within China. So they are extremely mobile. And also a part of the group for overseas, traveling, living, working, and studying. So I would say this is outstanding, more than the average. Then we have something that was very interesting for me, was how they are dealing with change. So they are looking for change. When I asked them about change, the eyes were opening, the face was going up, and I said, yeah, well, I need change. I get bored very easily, and I was constantly looking to learn new things. So this ongoing learning is a quite big quality, and it's not stopping. The oldest one I've interviewed is 63, and she was still learning and said, I go there and there to learn something. One other point, perhaps the last point, there are much more in the book, is they are very positive about competition. That's also interesting. For them, it is possible to say, well, I want to be the first, I want to be the best. But at the same time, I have a strong team orientation. For them, that is how to say that in English. It can go together. It doesn't mean you can have only one or the other one. That was interesting for me. So yeah, so quite outstanding personalities, I would say, with the respect to what is needed for a high management career.
Okay. I really love the point about change. I felt like, oh, maybe I'm a little bit Chinese there.
Yes, probably, from what I know about you. Yeah.
But where does this come from? Do you have an explanation? Like, why do they search so much for change? Is it because the environment, everything around them is constantly changing and they're so used to it? Or is it just that the country is so exciting and they just want to explore all the different sides? And
probably it's a bit of everything, but here we can also go back to Confucian values. I think it has a lot to do with this aspect of lifelong learning that a lot of Chinese that I had the pleasure to meet and to work with are really following. So if you don't change, you will not learn something new. And that's the philosophy behind it. So if I have done a job for 1 or 2 years, and it was easy to me, then I need change to learn something new.
Okay, sounds like a good explanation.
Yeah.
Okay. One last thing, maybe, like out of your research, how does this influence your current work as a career coach? Do you take aspects from that, or what can German women learn from Chinese women?
Oh, there's 2 questions. No? Interesting, yeah.
Okay.
Let's say the most important outcomes that any coach could use here is probably with women to look into these personality and characteristic things that we have identified here, and then coach the women through these different aspects, and to see where are they right now and how can they lift certain things up to their best with the support of a coach. And the main point is probably with German women to challenge their inner beliefs about what is possible in a woman's life, because we are limited here with this raven mother image, and limited not only in a negative sense, because some women in Germany choose a different path. They want to be housewives, they want to have different things in their lives, and they need to, because of the kids and because of how we are structured. And I wouldn't judge that. I think if you choose it with joy, it's okay. Yeah. But if you stay in a situation where you're not sure what you want, then a coaching can help you to define your career orientation and what you really want.
Okay.
And I think that's also what women can learn from these Chinese women. I see them as role models for a career. If you want to do a career and you really want this a lot, the findings from this group can support you in developing yourself stronger. Yeah, you can measure yourself against that group.
I mean, I had this impression myself when I read the book that, well, if you want to be part of this high percentage, you really have to be sure you want this, because it also, like from, maybe it's still a very German perspective, but you also have to kind of not give up, but reshift your life somehow, maybe. Yeah.
I have to correct here. I don't have the impression from my research that these women regret what they do. This is a German perspective.
Yeah, that's why I said. I feel it's probably still German. Yeah.
They are very proud of their achievements. They also get feedback from the society. They can be proud. And one important thing that we have not mentioned, 71% of these women, or 74, I have to check, but around that, they are mothers. And they have one child and some have 2 children. So they don't have given up on that point. Yeah, the majority is mother, and they are happily mothers, and they are good mothers, and the kids are very well taken care of.
Yeah, okay.
By grandparents.
Okay,
now we can discuss if this is the right model, but it is one model that is working in China. No?
Okay, that goes maybe a little bit in the direction of my last question. If there is anything that Chinese women can learn from us?
Well, I think that's an interesting question, because more and more Western influences, of course, come up in China now, and the young generation, Generation Y and Z, I have been told are very different. So they work less, they have financial security already, and they might have different ideas about their lifestyle. So I think it will be interesting to see how these new generations, if they follow our model where you have choices and where you can work part-time, or where you must work part-time because you have nobody for the kids, but at least we have different scenarios here. If they will be hobby-oriented, if they will be vacation-oriented, or if still women follow these role models of that generation, which are in my book. So I don't know the answer. It will be interesting to see that.
Okay, so that requires further research then.
Yeah.
That's always good to end a podcast or whatever you do in your research writing or whatever, if something else comes out of it. Okay, I think we did pretty well for our first video podcast.
Let's hope, and I hope the people who watch us will enjoy it and forgive us our wrong English.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so maybe to finish this up, of course, we're very happy to get feedback. I guess this goes for you as well, Bettina. So just drop us comments, notes. You can send your notes or questions, whatever you have, also to my email address. It's hallo, like the German hallo with an HALLO at Chinalogue. And then it's DE for Germany. So you can send us direct feedbacks or just comment wherever you watch or listen to the podcast. So I'm very happy to have you in this podcast.
Yeah, can I say a last sentence?
Yeah.
If German women in management functions see this and they are interested to participate in my new research, I still have the challenge to start finding these women. In China, it's done, but I need some German women now. Please contact us. Please contact the podcast, and we can see what we will do.
Okay, great. And I will support you however I can. And of course, like if you listen to the podcast, you will find all the information also in the show notes. So it's very easy to get in contact with us. And of course, I'll forward everything to Bettina that you have for her. So feel free to write us and send us feedback. So thanks a lot, Bettina. It was great having you, and the first video podcast.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.